unserer Fortführung von Martins Modern Work nach der Sommerpause. Wir freuen uns, dass wir wieder mit euch zusammen unterschiedliche interessante Themen besprechen können. Und ich denke, wir starten heute gleich mit einem sehr interessanten Aspekt zu der zukünftigen Arbeitswelt, nämlich Citizen, Developer, Low-Code, No-Code. Martin, wen haben wir heute als Gast?
Ja, herzlich willkommen. Ich freue mich auch, dass wir nach der Sommerpause wieder ein neues Thema bearbeiten können. Und wir haben heute als Gast Mike Fitzmaurice. Mike Fitzmaurice kenne ich schon viele Jahre. Er kommt ursprünglich aus diesem Business Process Automation Bereich, erst mit Microsoft oder mit Microsoft SharePoint. So habe ich ihn auch kennengelernt. Dann irgendwann hat die Karriere ihn zu Nintex gebracht und später dann zu WEBCON. Mike, nice to have you here. Thank you for joining us. And good morning.
Danke schön. Guten Morgen, guten Abend.
Yeah, for us not really good evening now, but soon. Yeah. So,
I suppose
please give some words about yourself.
All right. So quickly about me, I was the person who initially knocked on doors of technical people asking them to take a look at this thing called SharePoint. They did. They told their friends. It caught on. It became big. It was actually the attempt Microsoft made to become a leader in collaboration that worked. So that was fun. I've been at this for a very long time. I did workflow work before that. I started doing a lot of work on Microsoft around what we called at the time declarative development where you didn't have to write code. You could just describe what you wanted to have happen. That eventually became something known as citizen development, but Gartner had not created the term yet. And by the time I left to go to Nintex for 10 years, the term had stuck and the movement had started. So I was an early proponent of citizen development. And the nice thing about citizen development is that it's been going on for about 15 years. We've had the opportunity to observe attempts to do citizen development out there, and we've learned a lot about how well it works sometimes, how it doesn't work at all at other times, and we've also learned enough things about maybe some suggestions as to how to do it better. There's that. 5 years ago, I joined WEBCON after having left Nintex. Basically, I've been getting better and better and better at business process automation as I've moved from company.
Yeah. So, Mike, thank you. It's really a pleasure to have you here in our webinar and with your deep experience for so many times. Let's go back to our topic for today concerning the lack of skilled workers. For example, on the one hand, we lack skilled workers everywhere, no matter in which industry you look in. And on the other hand, we need more digital support and automation in all industries. And with your deep dive in this field for many years, what do you think? How can we face this lack of, on the one hand, many needs, requirements for automation, for digital process automation, and on the other hand, the lack of skilled workers all over in all industries? What are you thinking about that?
All right. Well, we're dealing with logic and mathematics as we approach this problem. Actually, the fundamental problem is not a shortage of skilled workers. The fundamental problem is not being able to build as many applications as people want. there are two ways to address that problem. One is to increase the productivity of people, of developers, and the other one is to create more developers, assuming we can't make them more productive than they already are. I think that both of those approaches are important, but I also think there's more to it, because the assumption that's in that question is that a developer is a developer is a developer. I think adding more people to the process will have a lot to do in a good way, but increasing the productivity of people that are already there should not be ignored. And finding ways for people to contribute without becoming developers themselves is also something that not enough has been done until recently with that idea. But yeah, I mean, if we assume that the way to solve the problem is just add more developers, we can't find them. We try to create them, and a number of companies have said, well, why don't we make development so easy anyone can do it? Each of these approaches by itself will not solve the problem. Kind of have to do all of those things and figure out where to do which thing to have the best effect.
So beside this, if we take one example, so there's a client who has many locations, and there are many employees with the same tasks and same activities, but different approaches. And that seems to be a skill issue, but or is it a process issue? What do you think? What solutions do you see here?
It might be both. So you've come up with a good explanation. So you have perhaps it's a multinational organization. Perhaps there's just a lot of hierarchy and bureaucracy, and each department or division does things different. There are many reasons for this, but we can tackle that problem a couple of different ways. We could say somebody in IT needs to write a very complicated application that looks at each one of these different divisions and does things differently. The other option is, well, we have somebody in each department build something just for that department. And by the way, if anyone who's watching this wants a solid example of this, I could think of, let's do something simple, leave requests. I want to go on a holiday. Well, it's entirely possible that different parts of the organization treat that very differently. For example, one part of the organization might say your manager has to approve it, and that's enough. There could be another part of the organization that says, yes, but we need 2 managers' approvals. Sorry, I'm dealing in Europe. 2 managers' approvals. And then we might have a scenario in which, say it's the help desk or the support team, and if I'm going to take a vacation, it means everyone else has to pick up my workload for me while I'm gone. So they should be able to approve or reject be taking time off. And so how it gets approved changes very much from place to place. But in all cases, we need to see whether or not I have earned the time, the available time. And when it is approved, we need to subtract it from my available balance of time. Also to schedule it to make sure appropriate people know that out of the office is turned on, that tasks that have been assigned to me have been handed off to different people, delegations, substitutions, those kinds of things. So now that we have a nice concrete example, we could have one of the people in support build the support leave request system. We could have somebody in the finance department do the finance leave request system. I would actually argue that doing that probably would eventually lead to chaos, because there's probably something in the organizational policies. There's a very particular way of determining whether or not someone has accrued available time. Everybody needs to follow it. So you either need a very strong hand from IT directing what those individuals do, or you need those individuals to pay a lot of attention to what organizational policies are. My experience with citizen development has been that it works really, really well when you're solving a personal problem, when you're scratching an itch, a pain point you feel personally. But the moment it becomes more of a formal application, citizen developers often forget critical things. They don't normally think about conformance with organizational policies. They don't necessarily think of making sure there's an audit trail when something is done so that we can comply with rules and laws. They don't often think about documenting something. There are a lot of things that certain kinds of business processes, certain kinds of solutions need that they don't necessarily do. So in a scenario like that, I don't know if I like the idea of each department having their own developer. You could have someone in IT build that very elaborate application, or you could use tools to build a solution that already factor in the fact that an application might need to branch its logic depending on which division it's in. So something that is mindful of business units. In other words, let the infrastructure solve the problem rather than the developer.
And the user interface, for example. So if everybody is designing the interface a different way, the usability, it's for one person it's fine, but for the complete organization it might be difficult.
That's true, even within one department. So, sometimes when I talk about how to refine citizen development, there's a slide I typically show, which is 5 different developers responding to the request to build me a form that collects somebody's personal details and saves it to a table. Each one of them has a user interface that looks completely different from the others. And it's not just look and feel. Some people collect the address information, for example, in a free-form multi-line text field, and then maybe parse it to pull out the state, postal code, and things like that. Others have individual fields for each one. They don't all do it. Some think about catching your home phone, your office phone, your handy telephone number, and some don't do that. They just assume you have one telephone number. The details might matter. They might not, but they often do, especially if you're trying to harvest information across multiple departments for the entire company. So if you're going to do citizen development, it kind of needs to be like an orchestra where IT is the conductor. Or it could be you only allow citizen development to take place when it's a personal project, a user base of 1, maybe 2. Problem is, the moment you have more than 1 user, you become a miniature IT department. You have somebody's priorities that aren't the exact same as yours. If you write something for yourself, it won't be perfect, but you will accept its limitations because you made a bunch of choices. Even if you didn't write down those choices or those specifications, you know them, you made those choices. You give the application to someone else, well, they have different choices. They have different priorities. They might think, this thing that you're not doing, no, it's critical. I need it. And this thing that you're spending a lot of time working on, it's not so important to me. That can wait till next month, next year. At some point, you need to decide what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, how you're going to explain it to other people. You become IT. And I don't think citizen developers like the idea of becoming IT. The other thing is, if you're not careful about making sure other people understand your applications, you could never go on a holiday because they might need a change made or they might discover a problem. And if you don't have at least one other person that can work on your application, well, then you must always be available. I mean, if you're the only user and you're on holiday, no one's going to be using your personal application. So yes, you can build that for yourself. And the reason I'm talking,
Because it's my workaround.
yeah. Well, Hewlett Packard, for example, I was on a panel last year with about 3 other people, and we were talking about citizen development. And Hewlett Packard's policy, at least at the time, was you have a user base of 1, you can use anything you want, build anything you want, anytime. If it has more than 1 user, then you need to get the center of excellence involved. And they're at least going to give you advice and coaching as to how to do it in a way that will fit in with the rest of the organization. But depending on the nature of the application, they might pick it up and do the work themselves.
Thank you. Following your explanations, there will be the question, does low-code fit for all? Huh? So based on your experience, where do you see the best or fastest impact concerning low-code, and maybe on their industries much more suitable for low code than others?
Well, here's the fun part. We as an industry have sort of taken the concept of low code development and citizen development and thought of them as one thing. That was a mistake. They're actually very different because there are citizen developers. A citizen developer, loosely defined, is somebody who writes applications, but it's not their job to write applications. They have a different job as they do a little bit of extra development to make their lives easier. Development is not their job. Development is something they're doing while they do their job. So someone in IT writing a script counts as a citizen developer, and a script is code. So it's possible to do citizen development with code. Admittedly, not so common, but it is possible and it does happen. But what is very common is low code being used by professional developers. So low code is a tool. Low code saves time, it does make some things easier, but it also improves productivity, even if you don't need it to be easy, just need it to get results. So low code's for everybody. Citizen developers, professional developers, everybody in between. Low code is healthy, alive, well, flourishing. WEBCON's happy, Microsoft is happy, everybody's doing low code. In fact, I would argue that professional developers know how to make low code do better work. I will say that there are a lot of people that look at low code and don't accept its limitations, and they spend so much time trying to hack low code into behaving in a super custom way that they might as well have just written code. But let's leave that situation off to the side. I would say that low code's usable by everybody. It can make development easier to appeal to non-professionals, citizen developers, but it can also make professional developers much more productive. And that is where I think low code can play a significant role. There's one other thing about this, and when I'm criticizing citizen development, I need to be very clear on this. When I criticize citizen development, first of all, again, if you're writing an application for yourself, I'm not criticizing that at all. You're writing an application for other people. What I criticize is saying, okay, you, Mr. Citizen Developer, Here are some tools, build it for yourself, don't bother us. In other words, citizen developers are on their own doing work, not sanctioned by IT, et cetera, et cetera. We are abdicating. We are letting go of innovation and letting other people. I'm not so fond of that. What I am very fond of is citizen participation. So and this is not unique to me. It's not unique to WEBCON. Microsoft has a concept of this they've been advocating for a couple of years called fusion teams. But the idea is it's not about one person building the application. I don't need everybody on a team whose job it is to deliver an application to be an expert in constructing it. So I might have a professional developer on that team whose job it is to do the actual construction. They might write code, they might use low code. I might have citizens involved in that project doing the design work, the specification work. And this is where low code comes in. So many low code application platforms and tools only focus on the construction part of the application lifecycle. I think this is a mistake because you guys develop software, right? I know you do. I'm teasing. You write software, and I don't think you will object to the following statement. I think construction is only about 10% of delivery. We might have a disagreement about whether it's 10%, 20%, 5%, but it's a subset. It's probably the minority. You spend far more time analyzing requirements and negotiating specifications and acceptance criteria. You spend far more time documenting and explaining and doing user education and gathering telemetry and doing version control and deployment logistics and educating IT on how to maintain an application, and then coming up with ways to collect feedback and propose changes and so on. There are so many parts of delivering an application that aren't what we think of as development. We should be paying attention to that too. If all you've got are tools that help you with that 10% of the life cycle, they aren't going to make a huge difference in productivity. But if you have low-code tools that help citizens design specifications and acceptance criteria, now we got something. We're going to help with more than just construction. We're going to help with design and requirements gathering. If you've got an application platform that provides an auditing facility to every application, no matter how big or how small, that's something the application developer doesn't need to write. Similarly, if it automatically documents itself, again, things that will help shrink the delivery time, put less responsibility on the professional developer. Essentially, there are many, many things we can do to allow people that aren't doing development to contribute to a project. There are many things we could do with tools to shorten things in the delivery life cycle that have nothing to do with the actual building, construction of an application. We do that, low code becomes a hero, even if citizen development changes. So you have citizen designers, citizen reviewers. I'm a big fan of that. Citizen developers should be doing work for themselves. Citizen designers and citizen reviewers are part of a team of experts contributing their own unique skills. That developer probably doesn't understand how the business works, but I bet you the citizen designer does. If we have low-code tools that let the designer and the developer speak a common language, we cut down on confusion, we cut down on design time, and we give requirements to the developer that can be acted on. How many times have you two been given some scoping documents that are asking for things your tools can't really do. And part of what you have to do is go back to the user and say, we can't exactly do it like this, but if we did it like this, would that be okay? The answer is more often than not, yes, but you have to spend a lot of time refining what someone is imagining with something that is actually possible. And again, if you get the people using a common set of design elements and a common design language, you can eliminate a lot of that. So I think a lot of the effort that has to happen in low code, and some of it is happening in some places, is pay attention to the entire life cycle, not just construction. Give people that aren't developers tools to help. That makes a huge difference.
So Mike, let's take another topic. Do you see any geographical difference between North America, Europe, especially Germany? Do you think we have to change something in the German market?
To use more low code.
Yeah. So I mean, I see a higher affinity in my international projects when I work with Americans than when I work with Germans. So when I've seen your first talk about, I think it was a keynote somewhere, and when you had them talking about citizen development, they said, yeah, it's okay, it's working for Redmond, but it's not working for Germany. I don't see the skills, the behavior here in the same way. Oh, it might be now. Sorry.
Maybe. How about this? Americans are more willing to accept risk. That might be the differentiating factor. I don't think they have fundamentally different business problems than Germans or Europeans. In fact, I think Europeans have more interesting problems because Americans normally don't have to think about multiple languages, multiple currencies. They have fewer corporate or governmental policies that they need to conform with. Now, if you try to do something very clever, how about, there are projects that would work completely fine in the United States that would be unacceptable, like figuring out which users are taking more time to complete tasks. It's not that you can't do that in Germany, but you have to be far more careful about it in Germany because of privacy laws. And look, I'm not here to say privacy laws are good or bad, but they exist. You need to pay attention to them and do the right thing according to them. And so it makes things different. So there are fewer regulations, fewer laws, and a greater tolerance for risk in the United States. And that's probably why they adopted this sooner. But the other thing is, corporate culture, if they aren't as strict, the idea of somebody just buying a copy of one set of tools or something like that, or subscribing to something with a credit card, building a new application in the cloud, there's more bureaucracy or more steps that would be required to approve that in Deutschland compared to the United States. But that said, again, we're conflating the idea of citizen development and low code. There's never been a problem, or there should never have been a problem, with a German organization adopting low code if they let professional developers use it. The thing that can get in the way of adopting low code, and this is actually not unique to Germany, but and it's not unique to the United States, but it is very much one of the bigger barriers. Low code, by definition, saves time by reducing choice. It reduces choice. It said, look, we're always going to have our forms be rectangular. We're always going to have our forms have one pane in the center and a place for buttons on the bottom. It's not necessarily exactly like that. Depends on the product. But they're going to make some choices for you in order to save you some time, and also to deal with there are some things you might not think an application has to do, but it does. So they do it for you. Every time they make a decision for you, that's a decision you can't make yourself. The reward for this is that things happen more quickly. Those choices are made, you don't have to spend time making them. Problem is when a lot of people have a lot of requirements that are not, that conflict with the decisions that have already been made by the low-code platform. In other words, for example, maybe menus are expected to be always at the very top, and the requirement is, no, they must be on the side. That's not really a coherent business requirement, but it might be a personal requirement that someone decides is mission critical. Turns out they could probably use a menu that ran across the top and everything would work quickly. And if they just used a tool as opposed to fighting with it, they could get their solution immediately. But if you design your requirements in a world where all things are possible, you either have to fight with a low-code system in order, or hack it basically in order to make it do things the way the requirements specify it, or you just use code. I have found a lot of early, oh, by the way, if you are using code, all things are possible. So it could be that people that want applications, business users, decision makers, expect requirements to work the same way. And when low code can't do exactly what they want, they get frustrated and think it's not successful. There's an evolution that must take place with low code. Everybody involved needs to accept the fact that it allows this by saying, we've already made these decisions. Applications are going to behave the following way. What would you like that application to do within these rules? And if you can accept that, you get an enormous amount of productivity out of it. But if you keep demanding things that only code can produce, low code will actually slow you down. You need to change what you want in order to reap the benefits from low code. And I'd say that, in saying that, perhaps German companies are more interested in tradition. So we've been having our applications work this way. It's going to take us some time.
I did.
Yeah. Okay, you guys are smiling. You're almost laughing. So I'll stop there.
I deeply agree. I deeply agree, Mike. Mike, you mentioned data protection, data regulation. For example, concerning the healthcare sector here in Germany and the social welfare sector here in Germany, I'm convinced that the data protection like it exists actually will hinder a lot of evolution here in Germany concerning in the healthcare sector. I know some examples also from the Anglo-American, Anglo-Saxonian landscape, and concerning to Germany, there are huge more possibilities outside of Germany. Do you have some experience in this branch?
This is where low code being smarter and paying attention to more than just construction helps a lot. So, for example, it could very well be, I'll give you a good example, that isn't German and isn't American, it'll be Canadian. If it involves any kind of federal government services, it must 100% be available in both English and French. And in parts of Canada, it also has to be available in Inuktitut, indigenous language spoken up north by the Inuit. Traditional American style development would treat multilingual stuff as an afterthought. It would be a feature, wouldn't be built into the DNA of the tool set they're using. At least with low-code tools designed by Americans, they don't usually take into account multilingual issues, multi-currency issues. But what if you're working with tools that assume that every single string that a user sees has a language table associated and provides tools to make the translations happen as quickly as possible? Now it starts getting interesting, but depends on the quality of the low-code tools. If you have, here's another thing. A lot of low-code tools operate from the point of view that everything is allowed unless you, the developer, explicitly take away those privileges. But they start with 100% everything goes. Your job as a developer is to restrict access. That makes compliance with privacy laws, with data protection laws, much more difficult, because you have to think about every way someone might want to get at something and stop it. But what if you have a low-code platform that assumes that no one has any access until it's explicitly granted and allows you to create business rules that can be consulted to calculate whether or not someone should have privileges or not, that can return a yes or no answer that your application can use? So you might create a business rule that says, is this person authorized to see this patient record? So it has logic that it stores for reuse across many applications to decide, all right, well, is it that doctor's patient? Are they working on that case? Are they an immediate family member? Do we have an authorization to allow them to see it? Many, many, many questions get checked, and it comes back with an answer. So if I'm building an application that creates something to be sent to the doctor, all I need to do is ask the business rule, am I allowed to do this? It comes back with a yes or no answer. I don't need to be an expert in those policies because I'm using a platform that gives me a place to store those policies and check them. And by default, the answer is going to be no unless I'm authorized yes. So yeah, it depends a lot on the tools you're using. When I said before that most low-code systems are only focused on construction, nothing else, that's a problem. When they think about things that should be in infrastructure and treat them like features that the developer must build themselves, that slows things down. That takes a lot of time. Low-code should be helping with everything if it's supposed to do so.
Thank you very much for supporting these ideas.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the future of low-code. What do you think how low-code can involve in the future? Will it be the voice input in the future, or what role, what share will artificial intelligence play for business process modeling and also for low-code?
I think that there are plenty of things. There's plenty of room to evolve. So over the last several years, what we wound up doing is coming up with easier ways to do integration with other systems. We developed robotic process automation tools to help automate tasks when there's no API. So instead, you manipulate the user interface of another program. Those help. Using those tools and only those tools is a mistake because you're really automating activity. Process is something bigger than any one activity. It's a collection of activities, a collection of decisions, a collection of assets and priorities and outcomes and measurements and everything else. So a process is a much bigger deal than a task. But automating tasks is a very good thing. But you asked about the future. So two things come to mind. How about, voice input? Absolutely. Well, we kind of already have that to some extent. A lot of us have embraced mobile devices. Mobile devices always know where you are, always have the ability to get at barcodes and voice input and everything else. So you've seen some of this already. Real question is AI. And some of us have already been doing AI work. AI can take multiple forms. So one would be inferential AI, discovering things from all the data business processes create, looking through audit trails, determining rules that might be implicit that no one has ever made, no one ever wrote out. Like, for example, maybe there are requests for approving purchases, and they tend to range between 50 and 5,000 euro. If a AI determines that's a pattern, and then because of that, when a request comes through for 10,000 euro, it alerts me or adds an extra approver, just not because it's wrong, but because it's unusual. I like that. And, we can already do things like that at WEBCON, where it's not that someone wrote an explicit policy to say, if it's over 5,000 euro, it needs an extra approver. This is something that the workflow can intelligently adapt. Things like that are really helpful. Other things are to make use of generative AI like ChatGPT and Bing and Bard and so on and so forth. Those are available as web services. So if you've got a business process platform that knows how to call a web service, you should do the work to make sure that it can call those web services so that you can have it create content for you as part of a content-centric business process. We will get to the point where you could probably generate a business process model using nothing but AI. But I don't think we're going to do a good job of it for a little while. And the main reason for it, that's the one thing. I mean, there are plenty of things we can do with AI today, and we should be doing them, and some of us are doing them. But generating business processes through AI isn't actually intelligence. We need to remember that it's artificial. It simulates intelligence by analyzing massive numbers of examples. Until people give us millions of examples of business processes in a consistent way that an AI can analyze, do machine learning on, and create brute force generative models, it's not going to be able to do a good job of that. It will eventually. I do think we will get there, but it's going to take longer than people expect. There are many, many, many more examples of blog posts, emails, lots of other kinds of text that have been created. So we're good at generating those. We have lots of examples. But I don't think that's... we'll get there. We're not there yet.
Thank you. Time is running, really running. It's a great pleasure to discussing with you on these ideas and then themes. Let's change to some questions.
Yeah, we had some questions. So Björn had some question. Björn writes, in our company we have also opted for a citizen-assisted development approach. We wanted to make sure that the UI, UX is as similar as possible across all applications. Without this, in my opinion, it will be difficult to convince employees of digitalization. In addition, we already have existing systems in use from which we collect our possibility rights data back. You can't just allow everyone to do that. So have you think like a developer restricts the user group considerably? That is why we have bundled the people responsible for application development in the corporate development department. All computer scientists with business know-how, this has paid off. So Björn, is there any question or just a statement?
Well, I'm glad he made that statement. I'll wait for him to type in response. I mean, I agree with them. the thing about that is, oh, he just wanted to agree. Well, thank you, Björn. What I would say to that is we're in a better place today than we were even 5 years ago, because non-developers know more things than they used to know. They're better participants in team efforts than they ever were before. Before, where it was almost, a combination of negotiation and sparring, like you're in a wrestling ring. It's not like that anymore. People are able to work together much better than they used to, because non-developers understand development more than they used to. So even though they're not necessarily good at developing, they're very good at interacting and collaborating. I, for one, am very optimistic.
So I think this is a great final statement. I would have many, many, many questions. We could discuss for 2 more hours or whatever. But the time is running, and we just say thank you, Mike, for your appearance, for your input, for your discussion. It was a pleasure.
Yes, thank you, Mike.
Thanks. It's I love you.
So, ja. So the next Martin's Modern Work, or now changed to Deutsch. Die nächste Folge Martin's Modern Work findet statt am 27. September. Zu Gast Thorsten Katthöfer, Spezialist für AI und Learning. Wir werden dieses Thema dann vertiefen, wie AI das Lernen am Arbeitsplatz unterstützen kann.
Ja, danke euch allen, dass ihr dabei wart. Wir sehen uns dann Ende September wieder. Und Mike, thank you very much.
Mike, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, bye.
Okay.